first of all, I really enjoyed the film. I should probably say that before we get started.
Thank you.
I mean, so apparently, in terms of casting both of you, apparently Steven Spielberg was a big fan of your TV work, Benedict, and thought you were Errol Flynn reincarnated, Tom. So, any comments on that?
My goodness.
Well, he hadn't seen Sherlock at the time of casting. I think he actually saw me in films. I think Gina J did a very good job of sending me through work I'd done in Atonement, The Other Berlin Girl, and I forget now what other film I'd done before then, but it was that. It Stars of Pretend, maybe, yeah. I think it was probably Atonement that swung it for me for him. But anyway, yeah, that was it. And then he saw Sherlock and fell a little bit in love with that and what I do in it.
As did everybody.
Well, bless you.
Yeah.
And are you Errol Flynn reincarnated?
I think he is. Hey, look at him, for Christ's sake. And he can act.
I can't comment on that. I could possibly comment.
I can. He is Errol Flynn reincarnated. He's an action man. He's got the looks. He's an incredibly talented actor, and he's one of the finest of our generation and a friend.
Darling.
I'm very proud to know.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. I can feel the bromance happening. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's amazing that he said that. I sort of can't get my head around it really, because he really is the architect of my imagination and my certainly my cinematic imagination. I grew up like everybody, I think, born in the 80s on Jaws and E.T. and Indiana Jones and then later Private Ryan and Schindler's List, and so to have him say that is just sort of a monumental compliment. I can't even get my head around it. Amazing.
Awesome. So, I mean, when it came to actually shooting, I mean, were you both able to ride in advance, for example? Were you? I
could ride a little bit, because on Thor I'd done some riding. There's a section where the Asgardians ride out across the Rainbow Bridge. And
as you do.
As you do. Which we shot on a beach, and then they kind of CGI'd in the rainbowness of it all afterwards. And
the extra legs on the horses.
There were 4 legs on those horses.
Oh, okay,
There's
what horses were you thinking of?
Sleipnir, Odin's horse.
Has more.
Tony Hopkins has an 8-legged horse.
Why have 4 when you can have 8?
Well, he's Tony Hopkins. He needs it.
Exactly.
He deserves it, frankly.
He does, after his hard work.
Exactly. Anyway, the point being that Asgardians ride like cowboys, i.e. they ride Western, and Western saddles are very comfortable and wide and deep, and you have a pommel and you just sort of sit there and pretend to be John Wayne. And so I turned up at the stunt farm when we were training and said, yeah, I think I can kind of ride. And only to be told I looked like Billy Crystal at the beginning of City Slickers. Hopeless, sack of potatoes, it's not a motorbike, Tom, it's a living, breathing animal. Show it some respect and put your socks up. And so in turn we all had
our learning curves. Mine was even more severe. I hadn't really ridden since I was 12, which I keep on having to point out. Otherwise, my mother will be after me. She facilitated some riding lessons when I was very young. I think just to keep a bored child entertained during school holidays, and it didn't really work because the horse got wind of that quite quickly, and was equally as bored or terrified or willful as I didn't want it to be. So it was hard work, and I didn't really take to it. And I was frightened of horses. I mean, not frightened, not to the point of not wanting to get back on one or having experienced a bolt or any bad experience. But yeah, it was a gentle breaking in, and then the transition of moving from that first moment into something where you're controlling what's going on, where you're in much more of a symbiotic relationship with the animal, was just magic and a skill and a profound experience that hopefully I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.
I mean, I thought that cavalry charge, the scene that you're obviously both in, summed up for me better than anything I've seen on film the offensive stupidity of World War I as a concept, not as from your characters, but in terms of the way that the war was run.
Well, it's the ignorance and the innocence with which our regiment goes into it. Is that there's a legacy of military history that said that if you go in with sabres gleaming in the sun and you cry hell fury, that you'll scare them back into their burrows and we'll be home by Christmas. And the British military high command had no idea of the extent of the German technological developments and the machine guns that they had. And I love that line when the German officer says to you, like,
what were you doing?
What did you think you were doing? Who do you think you are? And it's not a slur against Major Stewart particularly. It's just, like you said, the offensive stupidity of the military, that it wasn't. It was the end of the days of chivalry, and war changed and the world changed.
Although I would say very quickly that we're at the beginning, to just defend it slightly, because it is about that. It is about that learning curve. It is about Edwardian military methods meeting modern mechanised warfare in the shape of a machine gun. And it is all about that transition. That's exactly what that moment entails. And rightfully we are judged or they are judged with historical hindsight as being stupid and profoundly wasteful. But actually,
the whole war.
The whole war, but particularly that as a turning point, I think, you know, it does, as you say, illustrate that sort of pomposity gone wrong. But in order to face what I basically know, I think, and I know that my character at least appreciates the danger of what's to come. He would have known about the Boer War. Machine guns had already been around. They didn't know how widely it was going to be used by the Germans. There was something like 100,000 cavalry, both the French and the English, and it was used as a front flank before we got entrenched in trench warfare. And the war was very fluid, and it was at a time of great hope that if you charge fast, we're still making this mistake. The Americans made this mistake in the Gulf War. You know, charging through Iraq just opened a sore through the whole of the Euphrates, and basically kicked over the hornet's nest that is insurgency and all the complications we have now. And it was a similar thing. They wanted to have a spearheaded counterattack and knock back the Germans. And that in itself was not a necessarily bad thing to do, but what became ridiculous was the idea that horses could be used against machine guns. We worked on the Duke of Wellington's estate. He told me that there was a unit of horses sent out during the Second World War. Now, of course, in the Second World War, you had mountain landscapes, you had awful lots of terrain which vehicles or human beings had a great deal of difficulty with, that horses could still help with. But there was a battle unit that he was in charge of. They all came out and they knew it was going to be a waste of life. They were wasting horses. He had to kill the horses that were sent to him. He had to give that order to execute the horses. This is in the Second World War. So God forbid it happens again, but one of the worst things about what happened to the horses, and this is hopefully we've learned our experience, but it even carried on in the Second World War. So it's I think that's one of the more moving aspects of the film. You see man's stupidity to man, but you also see it meted out through the treatment of the animal.
Animals as well.
8 million horses were killed in the First World War.
It's insane numbers.
You can't even imagine what 8 million horses looks like.
No.
I mean, you wouldn't fit 8 million horses on a football pitch. Probably not even 2. I mean, it's just staggering.